Most people know what a director does. They know what actors do. They know what cinematographers, editors, and composers do. But ask somebody what a film producer actually does, and the answer usually gets a lot less clear. Because producing isn't just one job, and most of what producers do happens long before anyone yells action. My co-founder, Mark Klebanoff, has produced films that have sold to Netflix, Lionsgate, and distributors around the world. And one thing he always says is that by the time everyone else shows up to set, the producer has already fought an entire war. Then production starts and they fight another one. Because producing can be the best job and the worst job in filmmaking at the same time. It's one of the most stressful, chaotic, and rewarding jobs on the planet. And most people have no idea what battles are being fought behind the scenes. So today I want to pull back the curtain and show you what a film producer actually does, what they're responsible for, and why understanding that role can completely change the way that you approach filmmaking. Because movies don't get made simply because somebody had a great idea. Somebody has to take responsibility for turning that idea into a finished film, and that's the producer. Most people understand that movies take years to make. What's much less clear is what the producer is actually doing during that time. Because before the cameras roll, before actors show up, before anybody steps onto a set, somebody has to get the project to exist in the first place. And that starts with development. The producer helps shape the project, package it, build a budget, work with directors, casting directors, attach talent, talk to investors, talk to distributors, and figure out whether the movie actually has a path forward. And that's where the job becomes a lot harder than most people realize. Mark once spent nearly a year packaging a film. He invested his own time, his own money, attached talent, and did everything he could to get it made. Then the project was taken away because another company made bigger promises, and a lack of paperwork left Mark with no control to prevent it. So a year's worth of work disappeared almost overnight. Now, years later, he ended up making a similar film with a different star, but the lesson stuck with him forever. Because producing is risky long before production begins. The producer has to succeed before anybody else gets the opportunity to do their job. No producer means no financing. No financing means no cast. No cast means no movie. The best producers understand both the creativity and the business sides. One of the biggest misconceptions about producing is that you can split the job in half, that there's the creative producer who gets to think about the story and the filmmaking, and then there's some mythical business producer who's willing to handle the financing, the contracts, negotiations, and all the risk. The problem is those business-minded producers are incredibly rare. Most filmmakers would love to focus on the creative side and let somebody else deal with the stressful parts. But if somebody's raising the money, carrying the risk, and putting their reputation on the line, why would they want to handle the creative control to somebody else? That's why the best producers tend to live somewhere in the middle. There are producers who only care about the business. There are producers who only care about art. But the strongest producers understand both. Because filmmaking is both, right? Now, a director may have an incredible vision for a scene, and the producer wants that scene to work too. But they're also the person asking, can we afford it? Do we have time for it? Will this help the movie, or will it create bigger problems somewhere else? The producer wants the director to have everything they need, but within the reality of the budget. Because the producer isn't there to kill creativity, they're there to make sure the creativity survives. The director wants the movie to be great, and the producer needs the movie to be great. Because when the film is finished, they're the one answering to investors, distributors, and everyone else who helped to make it happen. It usually takes a lot of time, effort, meetings, calling in every favor and more to get a film funded, which is why it feels like a battle has already been fought before you go into production. And a lot of filmmakers assume that once the movie gets greenlit, it's the fun part and the hard part's over. But it isn't. It's just a different battle. Because the moment production begins, everything starts falling apart. Weather can change, locations fall through, departments go over budget, transportation can break down, actors can get sick, schedules slip, and every extra hour costs money. The producer isn't responsible for just one department. They're responsible for making sure the entire machine keeps running. And sometimes the problems are so ridiculous that you'd never believe them if they weren't true. For instance, Mark once hired a camera operator who owned the camera package and the grip truck. And a few days into filming, the entire production came to a halt. Not because the equipment failed, not because somebody got hurt, because the operator refused to eat food that had touched vegetables. Meanwhile, an entire cast and crew stood around waiting while thousands of dollars disappeared by the minute. It sounds absurd, but that's producing. You're not just managing budgets and schedules, you're managing people. And people don't always behave rationally when the pressure starts building. Now, weather can create that same kind of chaos. In a recent film, Mark ended up shooting overseas during monsoon season, and the original plan was to shoot all the exterior scenes first. But instead, the weather completely flipped the schedule. Sets had to be rebuilt indoors, scenes had to be rearranged, and the production burned through their contingency much faster than they expected. Producing isn't about building the perfect plan, it's about adapting when the plan falls apart. And the hard truth is that the producer makes the decisions no one else wants to make. It's probably the least glamorous part of the job, because producers spend a surprising amount of time saying no. No, we can't afford this. No, we can't. No, we don't have another shooting day. No, that change isn't realistic. No, we have to move on. They're the ones also having to negotiate with agents and lawyers. And sometimes that means standing around with people who have more leverage than you. Agents, managers, attorneys, and distributors aren't worried about whether your movie succeeds. They're worried about getting their clients paid. And as a producer, you have to protect the project even when those conversations become uncomfortable. As a producer, they also have to manage difficult personalities, and sometimes you have to fire people. Mark has never produced a movie where he didn't eventually have to let someone go. Not because he enjoys confrontation, because protecting the production sometimes means making difficult decisions that nobody else wants to make. Now, producers are also both the general and the cavalry. They're helping lead the production, but they're also the first person who steps in when something goes wrong or needs attention. For instance, Mark was producing a film and noticed the director wasn't getting the close-up coverage that the movie would eventually need in the edit. He knew confronting the director directly wasn't the smartest move, so instead he went to the DP and quietly said, "Hey, make sure we're getting the proper close-ups." Now the DP handled it and the right coverage was captured. That's good producing. It isn't about winning arguments. It's about solving problems in the smartest way possible while protecting the movie. And since we just mentioned directors, one of the most important distinctions in filmmaking is the director owns a film creatively, the producer owns a film as a business. That doesn't mean one role matters more than the other, it just means they're carrying different responsibilities. The director is focused on performances and story and execution. The producer has to think about that too, but also about financing, contracts, schedules, delivery requirements, distribution, and whether the movie can actually survive in the marketplace. They're answering to investors. They're the person dealing with distributors. And when things go wrong, the buck usually stops with them. That's why Mark needed to step in with the director, not because he wanted to take over, but because he could see a blind spot that the director wasn't seeing, and that would have impacted the finished film. So he found a way to make it happen that didn't cause a bigger problem. That's how the best producers operate in every department, from beginning to end. Mark jokes that producers don't get paid for their time, they get paid for their stress. Because when a movie goes over budget, actors still get paid, the crew still gets paid, the lawyers, they still get paid. The producer's often the last person who sees any money, despite carrying the most responsibility. But that's also why producers often own the biggest piece of the back end. And it's why the Best Picture Oscar goes to the producers, because nobody carries the movie from beginning to end the way they do. And this is why we created the complete indie film producer system, because most filmmakers spend years learning camera, directing, screenwriting, editing. Very few are taught how experienced producers evaluate projects, raise money, manage risk, navigate production problems, and determine whether a film actually has a chance of succeeding in the real world. Because producing isn't just about getting a movie made. It's about understanding that everything has to happen before, during, and after production if you want that movie to succeed. So if you'd like to see how we approach that process and what it would be like to work with us, you can click the first link in the description below. Now, wrapping the film finishes one battle and brings you to a whole new battle that a producer needs to succeed at, and one that most are clueless at. Now you have to get it in front of people. That means distribution, marketing, delivery, finding an audience, and competing in a marketplace where thousands of movies are all fighting for attention. Most filmmakers already know that getting a movie made doesn't guarantee success. What they tend to underestimate is just how difficult it is to get people to actually watch it. A movie can end up on a major platform and still lose money. It can get great reviews and still get swallowed up by everything else competing for people's attention. Because making the film is only part of the challenge, the next battle is getting those eyeballs. Mark jokes that getting strangers to watch a movie is sometimes easier than getting your own family to watch it. And he's not wrong. There are filmmakers who spend years making something they're proud of, only to realize that audiences don't automatically show up just because the movie exists. That's why experienced producers think about distribution, marketing, and an audience long before production starts. And you should too. What Mark has learned over the years is that this business runs on reputation. Everybody claims they have connections. Everybody says they can make things happen. but very few people consistently deliver. Mark has spent years dealing with agents, managers, attorneys, financiers, distributors, and the one thing he's learned is that if you can actually execute, people remember. If you raise the money, if you finish the film, if you do what you said you were going to do, because this industry is full of people who talk a big game and never deliver. Once you've proven you can actually get movies made, the same agents and managers who ignored your calls suddenly start picking up the phone. Not because they suddenly like you, but because you've shown them that you're real. There's so much posturing in this industry that simply following through becomes valuable. And at that point, people recognize that you're legitimate. And that's when opportunities start opening up. We all know that producing isn't about standing behind a monitor and giving orders. It's about carrying responsibility from the moment a project is an idea until the day audiences finally watch it. Most people only see the finished movie. They don't see the financing that almost collapsed, the contracts that had to be negotiated, the schedules that had to be rewritten, or the hundreds of problems that had to be solved before anyone ever pressed play. So if you're trying to become a producer, don't just ask, can I make a movie? Am I willing to take responsibility for everything that comes with making one? Because producing isn't easy, it's stressful, it's unpredictable, and most of the work happens long before anyone ever sees the finished film. But when the lights go down and your movie starts playing and you get to see an audience react to something that only existed in your head a few years earlier, suddenly all the stress and setbacks and uncertainty feel worth it. Because despite all the compromises and chaos, there's nothing quite like seeing a film come to life. And that's why we keep doing it. Not because it's easy, but because if someone isn't willing to carry that responsibility, the movie never gets made. And we need more great movies. So keep going, do what it takes, and get your film made. Now, if this video was helpful, take a second to like the video and subscribe. On this channel, we focus on the practical side of funding, distribution, producing, packaging films, so you can stop guessing, start making smarter decisions. Drop any comments you have or any questions below, and I'll see you in the next one.